In this two-part video series, we'll be looking at indices. Now, there are 8 general rules for indices, and in this video, we'll be looking at the first 5. And for the exam, we will either need to apply these rules one by one for each question. For some questions, we may need to apply a few of them for a single question, so it is good practice to understand all of these rules thoroughly. For the first rule, when we are multiplying two numbers with the same base, we will add the powers together. So an example of this would be if we had 3 to the power of 2 multiplied by 3 to the power of 6. These two base numbers are the same, so we add the powers together. So this will be 3 to the power of 2 plus 6, which is 3 to the power of 8. Our second rule, fairly similar, but here if we're dividing with the same base number, we subtract the powers. So an example of this, we had 4 to the power of 6 divided by 4 to the power of 2. This would equal 4 as the base number is the same, 6 minus 2, which is 4 to the power of 4. For the third rule, when we're raising one power to another, we will multiply the powers together. So unlike the first example where we have two numbers where we're multiplying, we add the powers. But in this third rule, if we just have one base number, a power, and we raise this to another power, we just multiply directly together. So an example would be if we had 8 to the power of 2 in a bracket and we raise this to the power of 4, we simply multiply 2 and 4 together, which gives us 8 to the power of 8. For the fourth rule, anything to the power of 0 is 1, so pretty self-explanatory. Whether we have 10 or we have a number like this, whenever we raise it to the power of 0, the answer will always be 1. For the fifth rule, anything to the power of 1 will be that number itself. So again, using these same examples, 10 to the power of 1 will be just 10. And a number like that again, to the power of 1, is just that number. So now let's look at some exam questions and actually apply these rules. Looking at this first question, we need to simplify m to the power of 2 that has been raised to the power of 3. Now looking back at our rules, we know that if we raise one power to another, we need to multiply them. So that will be m 2 times 3, which is simply m to the power of 6. For part B, we've got x to the power of 5 multiplied by x to the power of 8. Now we have the same base and we're multiplying, so we're going to add these numbers. So x to the power of 5 plus 8 gives us x to the power of 13. For part C, we need to expand this bracket and then simplify. So if we look at this first number here, we can break this down by writing it as 4 multiplied by p, which is 4p, multiplied by p squared. This p has an invisible 1 there, so we've got the same base number we're multiplying, so we can add these two together. So that will now become 4 multiplied by p to the power of 3. So that will just be 4p3. For the second bit, 4p multiplied by 3p, we can split this up. So we can multiply the integers together and then the p's together. So 4 times 3 is 12. P to the power of 1 multiplied by p to the power of 1 gives us p to the power of 2. So our final answer will be 4p to the power of 3 plus 3p to the power of 2. Looking at another question, here we've got m to the power of 3 multiplied by m to the power of 4. So again, we've got the same base, so we just add the powers together, which will give us m to the power of 7. For part B, we've got 5np to the power of 3 raised to the power of 3. Now for this question, we will need to raise everything within this bracket to the power of 3. So if we break that down, That will be 5 to the power of 3 multiplied by n to the power of 3 multiplied by p to the power of 3, and we need to raise this to the power of 3. And if you remember from our rules, we saw that when you raise a power, we multiply. So this will be 3 times 3. So our final answer will be 125, n to the power of 3, p to the power of 9. For the last part of this question, we are dividing. So if we look at this, we've got integers, q and r. So a way to solve this question would be splitting this fraction up and dividing them one by one. So to start off, we can do 32 over 4 multiplied by q to the power of 9 over q to the power of 3. And just going back to this question, whenever we have something like 32, q to the power of 9, r to the power of 4, we are multiplying in between all of these, which connects them together, which is why now when we separate them, we have a multiplication sign in between them all. So the last one, r to the power of 4 divided by r on its own, so that will just be to the power of 1. 32 divided by 4 gives us 8. Q to the power of 9 divided by q to the power of 3. We're dividing with the same base, so we minus the powers. So that will give us q to the power of 6. And we have r to the power of 4 divided by r to the power of 1. So we minus these powers here, which will give us r to the power of 3. Now we've got a 2 marker here. Please pause the screen and have a go, and we will mark this together once you're done. So for this question, we've got a bracket that has been raised to the power of 4. So what we can do is split up this bracket and raise everything to the power of 4. So that will give us 3 to the power of 4 multiplied by x to the power of 5 multiplied by 4, as we are raising it to the power of 4, multiplied by y to the power of 6 multiplied by 4, because again we're raising it to the power of 4. And this gives us a final answer of 81 x to the power of 20, y to the power of 24. For the last part of this video, we've got one more exam question here, which is worth a total of 4 marks. Please pause the video here and attempt this, and we will mark it together once you're done. So if we look at the first question here, we've got 1 over m squared raised to the power of 0. Now, as we discussed earlier, anything to the power of 0 is just 1. So 1 squared is 1. M squared to the power of 0 is just 1. So 1 is our final answer. For part B, this is a bit more of an algebraic question, but let's work this out. So we've got 8 x minus 4 over x minus 4 squared. So if we rewrite this with these double brackets, we get this, and as these two brackets are the same, we can cancel out, which leaves us with a final answer of 8 over x minus 4. For the last part of this question, we've got this bracket here, which has been raised to the power of 3. Now what we need to do, as shown earlier, we need to raise everything in this bracket to the power of 3 separately. So that will give us 3 to the power of 3 multiplied by n to the power of 4 raised to the power of 3, so we multiply, so 4 times 3 is 12, multiplied by w to the power of 2 raised to the power of 3, so we multiply again, so that gives us 6, and for our final answer we have 27 n to the power of 12 w to the power of 6. Now that is part 1 of this video series done. In part 2, we will be looking at the remaining 3 rules and going over some more exam style questions.